Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Harvest 2024 Lessons Learned for 2025. My name is Ed, and I'm the Sales and Market Manager for Hills Green, and I'll be guiding you through what promises to be an insightful and thought-provoking discussion. We are thrilled to have two industry experts with us tonight, Tom Turner, National Sales Manager for KWS, and Louise Penn, an agronomist and farm consultant with Ceres Rural. Both Tom and Louise bring a wealth of experience to the table, not just as professionals, but as individuals who are deeply connected to the agricultural community. They've been at the forefront of addressing the challenges of 2024 and are here to share their findings, personal experiences, and solutions to help us navigate the future. 2024 has been a tough year for UK agriculture, marked by the second worst harvest on recorded history, largely due to weather conditions. Tonight, we'll dive into how these challenges impacted different crops, soil, health, and farming strategies. We'll also learn from 2024 and how we can guide us towards a more resilient and productive 2025. But before we start, a quick reminder, you can continue gaining insights like this at CropTec, happening on the 27th and 28th of November at the NAEC Stoneleigh in Warwickshire. Later, we will pop the link in the chat for anyone who would like to register. If you do have any questions for this webinar, feel free to pop them in the chat as well, and we'll get to them. So let's kick things off with you, Tom. Can you sort of set the scene and share your personal experiences and findings from the 2024 harvest?
Trying to take any positives from this year has been quite tricky. From our side, we've seen late harvest all round. From maize especially, it's been incredibly late because the season has been so cold, and really just kind of looking at strategies moving forward. We're having conversations with farmers about maturity selection, nailing down those factors and identifying where we can improve those sort of things on farm, making sure that we get soil preparations right before we put crops in the ground as well, has been pretty much at the forefront of our minds as well. So it's not been the best year by any stretch of the imagination. And moving forward, there have been some very important topics to cover. Primarily, from an on-farm side, is getting the planning strategies right, making sure that we can put steps in place to mitigate things moving forward, because the weather can go wrong. We've experienced this, but if there isn't prior planning in place to make sure that we have some strategies, then you are going to be so much further behind than those who have planned and have put the work in to make sure that they can make the best of a bad season, and using consultants like Louise on farm where they can to build those sort of plans and resilience into their businesses.
When it comes to creating those plans, what are the key things people should be focusing on, really?
Well, firstly, you're going to be wanting to build a business plan which will cover up to 5 years at least, cash flows for around 3 years, making sure that you have a good amount of sensitivity built into your figures, making sure that you're taking into account key changes that are going to occur within that business. And from there, you'll be able to identify the weaknesses and look at ways of mitigating that, whether that's going to be adjusting your rotation, whether that's going to be taking land out, land which is not really productive out of production, putting in something else, or looking at changing varieties, changing strategies in a way to manage the continual pressures that we've seen. And Louise can probably add to that.
Would you like to add to that, Louise?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Tom said. I think that it's been, and I was going to go on to it in my talk, it's been a really challenging year, and we've got to be prepared for all eventualities, because I don't think it's going to get easier. I think we're going to see a lot more of this moving forward.
We've had a good question come in, fair, which fits into the sort of strategy side. What does happen if we do see a ceasefire in Russia and Ukraine and we see wheat prices drop by £30 a tonne? What would you say? How can you incorporate that into a sort of a planning phase?
That's very tricky. I mean, first of all, I would like to state that I can't really see prices dropping that dramatically, because we've still seen wheat coming through. I think realistically you will see a drop, but in that instance, you look at expanding your rotation, you look at ways you can take on a little bit more reliable income through SFIs or diversification, or try primarily to look at your rotation a bit more critically, maybe look at using energy crops feeding back into the biogas sector, or looking at some niche crops moving forward.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Tom said. I think that, you know, it is really difficult. I put together a lot of budgets for clients, and there's not much in it at the moment, especially where the wheat prices are. But the wheat market does seem to be less reactive to the war, and actually we're kind of down to the levels that we were before the Russia-Ukraine war. So I think that even if there was a ceasefire, I don't think it would have a dramatic effect. It actually seems to be more things like the extreme weather events across the globe that seem to have more of an impact. And I think that it's not something to worry about. We just need to focus on what's going on at the moment and making sure that we just de-risk our businesses as much as possible, that if there is a change in the wheat price, that we can react accordingly, to make sure that, you know, we stay on the right side of the line when it comes to profitability.
Another sort of good question on this sort of point is, the viewer would find it interesting to know how farmers and land managers are carrying out risk assessments when it comes to high risk crops such as maize and potatoes. Would either you have a comment on sort of that area?
I mean, potatoes, you could probably answer a little bit better than I can, Louise. But with regard to high risk, you know, we're realistically at the moment we're working with the EA to develop some strategies which farmers can then take on farm for maturity selection, because that's really going to be the key to it. You need to assess your land. It's a tropical plant. It's not like growing a cereal crop. It's got to be focused on the soil type that you're working with, the area that you're working with, and using those factors to then dictate the maturity that you go for. And that is a really important way of de-risking integrating maize into your rotation, because other than that, it's quite a straightforward crop to grow. It's getting that key element right, selecting the maturity. Varieties that can offer plenty of advantages. Great, you can have the best high performing variety around, but if it's not suitable for the ground that you're growing on, you're never going to see the performance from that crop, and you're going to see huge issues when it comes to harvest.
Yeah, I managed to have avoided potatoes for most of my agronomy career, which I'm quite happy about. But it's actually, I do use a lot of different risk assessments and tools throughout when I'm looking after my other crops. And actually, I think that we need to be making sure that we use those tools. You know, even when it comes to wheat, it's the main crop that we all grow. It's the one that we focus on. And actually just things like looking at your aphids, your BYDV tool. And actually we should probably be maybe paying more attention and developing more tools. I mean, one thing to think about from the 2024 season is the amount of brown rust that we saw. Anyone that's grown Crusoe last year will know what I mean. My wellies and waterproofs were consistently brown pretty much the entire 2024 season. And I think that, you know, we need to be thinking about not only using tools, but just looking more at the weather and joining the dots together. And because we didn't have any harsh frosts last year, it just didn't kill the brown rust, and that just kept cycling continuously. And I think we probably need to be looking at developing more tools and actually, you know, thinking about what's going on. And that's definitely something we're trying to do more at Ceres Rural, is, you know, looking at technically what is happening out in the field and out with the weather, and trying to join those dots a bit more so we can anticipate some of these things. And, you know, we should have been getting on crops earlier to get on top of that brown rust, but because it was a late season disease, it's not something that we really kind of thought that would happen. But that's something we just need to definitely think about more going forward.
Focusing more on, for farmers considering maize, What advice do you have around variety selection, soil preparation, and the overall sort of strategy? I know we touched on the risk side, but yeah, like an overall strategy for ensuring a good harvest, Tom.
I think we need to turn that a little bit on its head and come back to a comment I made earlier. Variety is important as a consideration because it's defined by the output that you're wanting. But the most important things to get right is looking at your site and making sure that you can take into account its topography, soil type, and then use a heat unit tool to be able to assess how cold it is and what sort of maturities you can then get onto that land, because that's going to be the most important element to focus on. If you get the maturity right, you can then look at your variety, and then your variety is then defined by the output, whether you're going for biogas, forage, or grain, which we've seen more of a growth in this year. As far as soil goes, maize is quite lazy. It likes a soft seed bed. So good soil preparation, making sure you've got a very soft seed bed is very, very important.
So although 2024 has been quite a tough year, let's try and get a bit of positivity in here, shall we now? Do you, either of you, have any success stories you'd like to show? Maybe a farmer coming through some challenges and coming out a bit more positive. Do you want to start off, Louise?
Success stories. Yeah, last year was really difficult. I mean, round my way, there was a lot of stuff that went in late, stuff that went in wet, and then we couldn't really get on until the spring. But actually, across all of my clients, you know, the spring started off really horrible, but actually, you know, I was really surprised at how well my spring crops, you know, once they're in the ground and the soil began to warm up, you know, I actually got some really good spring crop yields, even though they were planted quite late. And actually, you know, we had plenty of moisture, we didn't drought out, and it just shows that you know, we just have to deal with the conditions we have on the day, and as soon as it did dry out, people could get on and they could get going. And then the other thing that stood out is that my clients who had good soil and good soil health, and the ones that were regularly using organic manure in the rotation, and they were the ones that, you know, had good attention to detail, the ones that were doing the basics, the ones that have drainage, the ones that are fixing broken drains and digging out their ditches and have their PK and pH indices right. They are definitely the growers that had the more resilient soils and managed to get a lot more winter wheat in the ground to start with in the autumn, and then their soils also dried out quicker in the spring because that water could infiltrate down and get away quicker, and they were able to get on the land quicker than the ones that perhaps didn't. And I think that probably 2024 as a whole has just shown that we can't get away with it anymore. And I think there are some farmers that do seem to just get away with a bit of lazy farming and not attention to detail. But if we have constantly keep having, and I've seen that most of my career, you know, if we keep having these extreme weather events, you know, this is the norm now. You know, global warming is clearly must be a thing. We need to make sure that we've got plans in place and we're investing in getting the basics right and having good soil resilience, or, you know, it just doesn't work and you can't make money.
So say you were a farmer who had done a bit of that lazy farming, what would you be your instant advice? Like, this is what you need to start doing now.
I think it's just the basics, and I think it's working with your agronomist to, you know, go right to the start. You know, your soil, it's not just the brown stuff that we put the seed into. It's the basics, and it's the fundamental part of what grows your crop. It's your growing substance, and we need to think about, you know, understanding your soil more. So, you know, whether that's doing more in-depth soil testing, you know, you'll see a lot of that, and you'll see a lot of that at CropTec, but there's a lot more different ways now which you can get more in-depth soil testing. It's not just a W in the field. You can really get to understand, you know, where your acidic areas are, where your P indices are maybe a bit down, and you can really start to you know, put some attention to detail. You know, money's tight. It means if you map your farm more in depth, it means you can variably apply nutrients, which is also going to reduce the investment that you need to do. Also thinking about investing in organic manures like sewage sludge, farmyard manure, you know, anything like that. A lot of it you can make a deal with your neighbour, straw for muck deal, you know, get some more organic manure on the land. There's loads of things you can do, and it's not that difficult, and it doesn't have to be that expensive. A lot of it just, you know, involves you and your agronomist getting, you know, the important members of the family business or farming business around a table and coming up with the plans to get those fundamentals right. And then you can really start to improve stuff. And I think the younger generation as well, you know, they're the ones that are kind of interested in the technology side and attention to detail. You know, go to CropTec with them, you know, get them involved, because actually they've probably got good ideas, and they're the ones that, you know, perhaps want to adopt new ideas and be a bit more innovative, and try and, you know, not be lazy and try and, you know, really push forward and try and be really technical with all the decisions in the farm.
Do you have anything to add to that, Tom, or as Louise pretty much done?
Yeah.
A great job there?
No, fantastic job. I mean, the thing is, as Louise says, it is getting things back to basics, and it comes down to things like making sure that these farms who haven't traditionally been as involved in the more detailed side of their business actually come out, walk crops with you, put a spade in the ground, understand their soil profile, understand the issues that come from compaction, understand nutrient cycles, and have a better understanding of what conventional farming needs to do to kind of move forward. So we're not just thinking, oh, shiny piece of kit. We're thinking about how we utilize equipment more usefully on farm to get the soil conditions that we want and to make soil a hell of a lot more resilient. Because really it's the bread and butter, and the improvements that you can see in yield, in crop management, performance, and resilience within soil can be immeasurably different if you just apply a little bit of common sense. But the approach for this has to come from working with farm consultants such as Louise, because realistically, these are the guys who are on the floor on a daily basis, who are getting that continual professional development, who are able to see the areas that you as a farmer who's got a huge amount on are not going to be able to identify.
And I agree, Tom, it's the engagement with the grower. I mean, I go crop walking with a lot of my clients, and it's so good because you can really get them behind and see, you know, boots on the ground, see what's happening. You know, just this morning I had a client drilling, and, you know, just be able to dig behind, you know, dig in the field when the fields are about to go drilling, and look at the soil structure and decide, make the decisions together based on what we can see, dig behind the drill, you know, check, you know, making sure the seed's going in the right depth. You know, it's knowledge exchange. Like, I learn just as much from my clients as they do from me, and it's, you know, that whole team effort when it comes to approaching and improving the farming business.
So when it comes to last year, what sort of benefits did we see when it comes to farmers who've really utilised break crops, and what sort of things would you recommend people to use coming up into 2025?
Well, really, there is still a very strong argument for oilseed rape being part of a rotation, but it has to be carefully managed, which I'm sure Louise will pick up on. Advantages of using things like maize, especially in the east areas of the country, in the West Midlands, you've got plenty of biogas plants which are either already established or those that are coming into the fold. And they, you know, your gross margins aren't going to match those of winter wheat, whether you're on feed or milling, but the advantage of a break crop for helping you suppress injurious weeds, or such as blackgrass, and also creating a break-in cycle for pests and disease pressures is really quite valuable. So you won't be getting the gross margin performance, but from something like maize, for instance, you will get that sort of rotational resilience that really every farm needs to reduce their pressures from these seasonal issues.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with break crops, but I think that, you know, they're important. I mean, for the obvious reasons, they break disease cycles, allow you to target different types of chemistry on your grass weeds. But, you know, they give a lovely entry into a first wheat. You know, beans, there's a lot less beans being grown, not helped by SFI and the different options under that, but they give a really lovely entry into a first wheat. And, you know, first wheat yields, that they are very good. So it's also thinking about when you're looking at your break crops in isolation, you know, thinking, you know, rape gives you a really early harvest, but potentially gives you more slug pressure in your following crop. You know, all of them has positives, negatives. You know, maize, you know, also a really good break crop, but it might delay you being able to drill and get your wheat crop in. So I think it's looking at both of them and recognizing, okay, we've got to plan for this. You know, we know that we're going to be putting in wheat after rape, so we're going to, you know, allow for that. We're really being careful and making sure that the slugs don't get on top of it. And then I think people like to focus on the wheat because they think that's what brings in the most money, which often it is the best crop in terms of gross margin on a budget. But actually, we can't forget the break crops, and they require just as much attention. You know, when it comes to weed control, disease control, you know, they can't be the forgotten crop. You know, you can't forget that there's black grass under the rape crop. You know, keeping an eye on that, and making sure that we keep our control of all of our weeds just as good in there. And then, you know, it will allow really good entry into a nice first wheat.
I feel like I'm moving into the stereotype of focusing on wheat with this next question, but what would you say are the arguments for and against going with milling wheat or feed wheat?
Milling wheat is, we saw last year, we had really, really good premiums, which, you know, actually, when you looked at a budget, it was often most of the profit when it came to what we were making off those crops. But variety wise, we have got more good group 1 varieties coming onto the market. But growing milling wheat, most of my clients grow milling wheat. But again, attention to detail, getting on in the spring, making sure that we don't let rust run away from us. But I think if you look after them and you feed them well, although this year we had a lot of people didn't meet milling spec, the protein just didn't seem to be there. We had stuff was drilled. Well, we had some stuff that was drilled early, and that was very grassy, which I don't think the grass weed pressure helped. And then we had stuff that was drilled later, but the early drill stuff we got to about June, and we had some wetter weather, and we even had more grain sites, and then we didn't get the nicer weather to fill all of those grain sites. And I think that was, you know, the dull weather that we experienced in July just meant that we just didn't hit protein. And I think also we didn't feed crops early enough, because most people couldn't get on with a sprayer until end of Feb and into March, which meant that we just didn't get much early nitrogen on. I think that we probably should have been feeding those crops a bit earlier on. So I think it really, a feed wheat, you can kind of put nitrogen on when you want, you know, you're just going for yield, and it's a bit more forgiving. But milling wheat, if you can do it and you've got good soil, definitely go for it. But, you know, it can be an expensive crop to grow if you miss out on milling spec.
Excellently put. Anything to add to that, Tom? But I think Louise done a good job.
No, that was excellently put.
So reflecting on the challenges of 2024, what are your overall thoughts on integrating non-food energy crops into your rotations, specifically more across the biogas and biomethane markets? And what sort of key factors are you looking at influencing whether you should go down that decision with them crops, Tom?
Well, I mean, does it fit within your rotation is the first question. And if you've got that flexibility where you're wanting to integrate another break crop, whether you maybe been having a few issues with oilseed rape, you wanted to cut your area back a little bit, or whether you're removing that crop entirely from your rotation. You know, the key considerations really with integrating, you know, a bioenergy crop such as maize into your rotation would be, you know, what sort of offers have you got from biogas plants? What are they going to pay you? And whether you've got the flexibility in land, is your soil type right for growing maturing varieties which can yield well? When do you need to get that crop off? What's your following crop? And those kind of considerations are going to be really big influencers. And the thing is that the big bit to get behind is the fact that you're not going to get the premiums that you would off cereal crops compared to an energy crop. I mean, as a gross margin analysis, you're probably going to get between £1,000 to £1,100 per, you know, for a gross margin for energy maize, depending on the price that the AD is going to pay you. So it's not going to give those premiums, but there's certainly a growth area in that marketplace now with sort of a little bit of a drop off now from oilseed rape. It's important to remember as well that really the energy market is focused more on maize. You know, things like sugar beet in the past, energy beet are no longer really a big thing for biogas plants because they are quite a dirty crop. And the cleaning fees that are attached to that crop make it not something that the biogas sector are really interested in anymore. So maize is really your only option, but it is an excellent break crop. It's quite straightforward to grow as long as you get your soil preparation right and you make sure that your pre-emergence is on at the right time, because maize does not like competition. And then make sure that once it's got its canopy together, it should get through its growing season absolutely fine, assuming you pick the right maturity.
So I think we did cover a little bit of this in the past, and we did touch upon it, but a great question from James Warren in our audience here: if cultivations have caused a slow decline in soil functionality along with the chemical imbalances we're now seeing, how would you go about improving the structure and function of the soil?
I'll start with that one. It's all slow decline. Yeah, so I think a lot of that goes back to what I was saying, you know, starting with the basics and really beginning to understand your soil. So I'll use my own family farm as a kind of a case study. So we were ploughing and power harrowing, so a lot of tillage back at home, and we could definitely we had soil consultants out, and myself, and together we kind of knew that we were moving too much soil. So we've slowly started to move away from that. We're now direct drilling. So we're addressed the physical side, and we're making sure, you know, we're still putting subsoil, loads of subsoiling to just loosen up the soil, especially after a wet year and a wet harvest, to remove any compaction. So we're definitely trying to move less soil, which, you know, will improve the structure, will improve soil infiltration. And then also, you know, it's also addressing then the chemical side. So, and interestingly, there was an earlier question from James Griffiths about calcium to magnesium ratios. So we've done some more in-depth soil tests at home, which look at your soil as a whole. So, you know, what's available, what's also locked up. So you've got, you know, what's available in your fridge to the plants they can just get out and use today, and what's in the freezer, and it's there in the soil, but it's not necessarily available. And actually, there's so much going on in the soil, like it's alive. There's all these different chemicals, cation exchange capacity, you know, different ratios of different nutrients lock different nutrients up, and, you know, trying to really understand that. And actually, we found that we had really high magnesium in our soil, and that basically binds soil particles together. So we've actually put gypsum on the farm, which is going to move those soil particles further apart, which will flocculate the soil more, and that will allow for the soil particles to be further apart, which will allow for more infiltration and more air, and also improve the structure of our soil. And I think that, you know, it's just knowing more about your soil. Like, I know so much about our soil at home now, and I can go over the entire farm. I know all the different soil types in every different field. And I think that, you know, get really passionate about your soil and knowing it, and knowing all of the different areas and different soil types and where it's acidic. And you know, if you get interested and really fascinated by that, then it's only gonna lead to better farming.
I feel like this could be a good time as well, Louise, picking you again, sorry, about the series rural studies and what they sort of revealed about soil health and pest management.
Yeah, so, well, I was more, so we have our yield summary every single year that we put out. And so we're doing a lot more research. We've actually just launched series research, which is another part of our business. And we're going to be doing a lot more when it comes to researching, you know, all the different things that go on agronomically, and trying to tease out, you know, as I said before, about joining the dots and everything. But yeah, bringing on from the 2024 season, and what we found, we assessed all of our clients, and they fed back to us their yields, and we found that actually our average wheat yield this year was 8.53 tons per hectare, which was down from 2022. And we think a lot of that is, as you said, from being a really, really wet harvest. But yeah, we're doing a lot. We have a lot of farm walks in the autumn to kind of, you know, talk our clients and other people through, other farmers through, you know, what's going on farm and how we can improve what we're doing and the current thought processes. And we continue that throughout the year to try and help guide clients through those decisions.
Perfect, thank you. Probably a question for both of you here, but again, trying to get a positive spin on this. What were there any crops that surprised you of how resilient they have been this year? Maybe start with you, Tom.
Actually, I've been quite surprised at how some of the wheat has come through. Some of it which was looking incredibly bad, with, as Louise was saying, brown rust early in the season, as well as septoria and yellow rust being more prevalent down my neck of the woods. Seeing how some of it has come through, you know, especially a variety like X-Days. I'm not trying to push KWS in that way, but, you know, varieties such as that which have come out the other end looking good for the season have been real success stories. And that would really be it. I mean, the maize harvest, I would suggest, hasn't. Plenty of it is still in the ground at the moment. You know, we're coming to the end of it now, but it's been such a late season. I don't think there's really an awful lot we can garnish from there. There's only been one or two growers who I've spoken to who've been particularly happy with their results, and that's on ground that's been optimal for the maturities that they've had. It's just been quite a bad season. And, you know, a lot of people are just sat in the same boat, where the ones who've come off better are the ones who've planned for these eventualities and have got an eye for detail, have taken the time to look at their soils very critically, understand what their soil needs are, spend time with their consultants, and make sure they've got a broad rotation with plenty of ground cover, ensuring that their soils aren't exposed. Those have been the people who've come off well this season, last year. But even assessing by coming off well, still markedly lower than what we've seen before.
Louise, you want to add into that from your experience?
I don't think, nothing's really surprised me in that I had crops. I had crops last year that were mulled in a bit to really wet ground, and as soon as I walked it after it had been drilled, and it was drilled into really wet soil, you know, I knew this is not going to be good. And in a lot of places the seed rotted, it didn't do that well. But I think that it just shows that if it doesn't look, if you're sitting on the drill and you're thinking this does not feel right, don't drill it. If you're drilling and it's going to rain the next day and not stop, don't drill it, because if you can't go back, and spray. You know, there's a lot of people last year that didn't manage to go on with the pre-em, and I think, you know, I know it's so difficult not to just have a knee-jerk reaction to the weather forecast, and there's this big fear that, you know, winter wheat, it's our main gross margin crop, we need to get it all in the ground, we're not going to make any money this year. And I don't think that's true, because actually there were some spring crops this year that were really good. SFI helps because you can layer a lot of different things on top when it comes to things like spring cropping. And I think that, you know, nothing surprised me. If I know what how my crops going to perform. There's a few things that did surprise me, and actually winter wheat as a whole did perform better than I thought it would, considering how much it rained. But I think, you know, just getting crops in good conditions and going back to what we know we should be doing, we should be drilling crops into nice seed beds, and we should be making sure we've got time to get on and go with a pre-em, a post-em if we can as well, and just good farming. And I think if you can leave the field and go, that's a really nice, I'm really happy with that, you know, that translocates back into good crops and profitable ones.
Actually, I'll just kind of ask you a question, Louise. How many of your farmers, before they get in the drill, before they get on the cultivator, will go out and look at the friability of their soils before they travel?
Yeah, to be fair, I'm actually really lucky. I've got some really good farmers that I work with, and they will be going out and doing that. If they want a second opinion, we'll be going out and doing it together. I mean, I've got some growers that have been doing that pretty much every day. They'll be going out, walking the dogs, taking a trial with them, having a look, seeing if it will go today, just even not putting any seed in the drill and just, you know, going up the field just to see how it goes before actually committing to putting seed in the ground. Yeah, and making sure it's the right thing to do. And actually going to this season, 2025, I'm the area that I live in, I'm Northampton, in Northamptonshire, Bedfordshire, we've probably had the most amount of rain, I think, over the entire country. We had something like where I live, we had something like, some people a few villages over had 270 mil in 3 or 4 days. Like, it was biblical amounts of rain. And actually a lot of my clients have only really managed to be able to start drilling in the last 10 days. And I was at a client this morning, and he's held off, and he's held off, and actually now it's gone in so nice. And a month ago it was so wet that I just didn't think that he'd be able to get anything in. And I think it just shows that, you know, it's good to be patient. And then, yes, you only have a window, but just keep checking the weather, because he's so happy that he's drilling now. You know, there's rain coming at the weekend, but we've got enough time to get it in this week. Than if he'd had a bit of a knee-jerk reaction and tried to drill it when it was definitely too wet a couple of weeks ago. So I think it's, you know, sticking to what you know, and don't break your own rules, because it doesn't help you in the long run.
I think that's quite a nice way of alleviating some of the it won't grow in the bag lot.
Yeah, because it won't grow in the bag, but doesn't necessarily mean it will grow in the soil either if it doesn't go in good conditions.
Exactly.
Just on top of that as well, this year, what sort of innovative solution strategies stood out for you to sort of dealing with the weather? Alongside that, like, sort of what things have you saw farmers utilise to get into some really good success?
You want to take that one first, Louise, or do you want me to go?
You can start this time.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, firstly, it's variety select for the overwinter period. It's selecting variety which is going to give you that flexibility to have a wide drilling window, so you can delay it, as Louise has said, so we can get over the worst of some of this weather. I mean, right now we're sitting down in Wiltshire, and up until last week we had a fair bit of rain, but this week it's been absolutely fantastic. We've seen plenty of drills moving, and having that ability to utilize a variety like that and be able to have that sort of drilling window is a sort of strategy that plenty of growers really need to be thinking about, especially with the variability in seasons. The other thing is that if you have a huge amount of winter varieties going in, and that's your primary area of income, really spreading that risk a little bit, thinking about maybe adopting some more spring varieties. You can do very well off spring wheats. You can spread your rotations a little bit further with some other crops as well. You can look at these sort of things, integrate some SFIs onto less productive areas of ground. If you're mapping correctly, you should be able to identify those areas correctly. So using those sort of tools, a bit of common sense, and then again, coming back to this bit of underpinning it with a good advisor who is able to support you and bounce ideas off, are the sort of strategies which are going to win overall.
Yeah, I'd agree. Starting with good varieties. I've got a lot of clients now who need more seeds. I'm just putting Skyfall on the farm because I know I can keep drilling that till the end of February. And then also, clean varieties make it a lot easier. X days, clean variety, a lot of your feed wheat, some really good new varieties coming through. It just takes the pressure off if it's not going to get yellow rust, especially when we haven't had big windows to go out spraying. I mean, last year got to the spring, finally we're able to travel, and I was there, wanting people to go and put fertilizer on, wanting to go and put T-noughts on. People also, there was a massive backlog, and I think sitting down and actually, really clearly prioritizing, okay, what's job number 1, what's job number 2, what's number 3, who have we got on the farm, can we put this tractor on this and that on that, and can we send so and so off to go and do that, and just making sure that you're just really organized, because the windows are so short, and if you've only really got 2 or 3 days to get stuff done, you need to make that the most productive and efficient 2 or 3 days, because the windows just aren't as big anymore. And I think that just comes from just good communication between your agronomist, between the farmer, between the farm workers or members of the family, and just making sure that you can get stuff done efficiently and in a timely manner, so you don't miss those really vital windows.
Just on the back of that as well, just to help those issues, what tech would you sort of bring in and introduce on farm if you sort of had a almost dream budget for most farms?
Technology wise, I mean, really simply, just good communication, even if it's just a WhatsApp group chat for the farm, just to make sure that you're communicating well. But when it comes to more innovative tech, there's so much you can do from your phone now. A lot of my clients are running systems like Omnia, which they can use to, they've got all their soil mapping on there. They can use NDVI, so they can variably apply fertilizer, which has been really useful this season, last season, where a lot of the field didn't have that much crop in. There's just no point, especially with nitrogen where it was, throwing around expensive nitrogen on headlands that are just not going to come to anything. So I think investing in good technology like that, where you can do variable rate, you can also now benefit from the variable rate payment under SFI, which is £27 a hectare. So, if you are wanting to invest in that, now's the time, because you can use the money from SFI to do so. And yeah, good GPS systems. We've just upgraded all our GPS systems at home, driven by my brother, who's a lot more better at the tech side than my dad is. And I think that that's made a big difference to us, because it just means that, everything's more accurate. The drilling's better, the spraying's better. There's so much technology out there, and yes, it requires investment, but there is help from various different things, different schemes, grant schemes, which it's lots of consultants to get advice on those kind of things. But investment's good. If you're gonna invest, you need to make sure you're using the data in season. There's no point having a fancy system and then forgetting about it with the busiest of the day job and not using it. You need to make sure agronomist is using it and the farm's using it. And if that's driven by the younger generation, I do think there's a bigger chance for it to be utilised more so.
Have you got anything to add to that, Tom?
Really, you kind of took a lot of that, took a lot of the words out of my mouth there, Louise. I mean, especially with regard to something like Omnia, and you're touching on One of the areas of caution with it as well, the amount of times I've gone out on farm, either in my current life or my previous life, where you ask about nutrient management plans and to review them, and they've never been reviewed by the farmer. They've been written by the agronomist, the FATS qualified advisor, and they've been handed to the farmer, and that farmer has done nothing with them. So if you're looking at investing in this kind of technology where you've got a whole farm management tool, which are absolutely fantastic, and things like Omnia are brilliant, you've got to make sure that you are going to invest the time in getting the investment that you're putting into it out of it. Because there is no point having a whole farm management tool running behind you if you're then not going to underpin it with upping your own knowledge of it and using it correctly.
Moving on to more of on an SFI topic, what avenue would you suggest to go down when it comes to SFI actions for improving rotations and soil improvement? What sort of key sort of mixes would you be going for? What parts of the scheme would you be focusing on?
I think SFI is great. I do a lot of SFI applications, and all of us within Ceres Rural, we do a lot as a company, and we're constantly being updated and sharing knowledge between our own learnings on different farms. You know, that's a great thing to be part of, and the links to the consultancy side of my agronomy. And I think that I think to caution with this year is no knee-jerk reactions. I think last year a lot of stuff wasn't drilled, and everyone was thinking, oh, let's just go into a scheme. But I think that's not the answer. SFI is even more so important, with BPS being phased out and even quicker now, thanks to the recent budget. But I think it's looking at, what works, it's got to be specific to your farm. What works for your farm? What are the challenges for your farm? You've got to think about fixed cost per hectare. With you, if you're struggling to get round in a timely manner on everything, then actually having something within the rotation like the legume fallow NUM3 option that we hear a lot about, maybe that's a really good option. But also, don't forget about it. It's still a crop. You still need to control the blackgrass in it. You still need to get a good entry into first wheat. Again, as Tom said, taking unproductive areas out are great, but why are they unproductive? Can they be fixed in the first place? Is it just a broken drain, or is it a really wet bit that is never going to produce a good crop? So I think it's looking at all of those bits and then sitting down with your agronomist. I mean, I love the fact that I can do an SFI agreement, because it means I can sit down with my clients and I know what works for their farm and I know what's manageable. I'd hate to be involved with the farm and have a different consultant that's putting no insecticide or companion crops or the no-till option on bits that I know that won't work. It needs to be able to work. You need to understand the consequences of not putting insecticides on. You need to think about the practicalities around sowing a companion crop, and the no-till option sounds great. I think it's £73 a hectare, but you also need to think, you don't want to be too governed by rules. You need to look at the options out there, but at the same time, we don't want to be this time of year like, it's really gone a bit hard on top. Maybe we should just go and just lightly cultivate the soil just to create a bit of till so we can get the seed in, and then someone turning around and going, oh, but we're in the no-till option. So I think it's looking at what's out there, what works for your farm, what works for your system, but also not creating too many hurdles for yourself at the same time. Tom, have you got any more thoughts on that?
I mean, you've touched on quite a bit there already. I mean, the bottom line is that there are plenty of farmers, and you hear the horror stories and see the horror stories, in fact, where a lot of farmers have put the cart before the horse because they have not got the correct advice, or they've gone gung-ho into taking on sustainable farming incentive schemes, which are not in line with the farm management. So you have to prioritize your farm management and then look at what works around it. If you don't have those things in place, there is no point looking at it, because you're going to be fighting over that 3-year period to make things work, and you're just going to have a miserable time of it. With regard to what works in rotations, everyone's rotations are specific to them. So I don't really want to get too much into the detail of that, other than saying that there are plenty of stackable options, which would be no-brainer rate applications. Really should be things that you look at taking advantage of. The IPM plans, nutrient management plans, really should be things that people look at taking on board, because those are really easy wins. Things like the no-till option, which Louise mentioned, that's a very specific option which needs a lot of management to think about and consider. So it's important that when you're putting these putting sustainable farming incentives in place on farm, you really do need to get a consultant on farm who is a consultant, not just somebody who can write an SFI plan. Otherwise, you could be on hiding to nowhere.
Say you were one of these farmers who did sort of knee-jerk reaction into SFI, and the realizing that maybe it wasn't the right choice for them, what options do they have?
So you have to do 50% of the option that you put in the first year. So if you put in a lot of NUM3 last year as an option because you hadn't drilled much, you're going to have to do 50% of that area, at least 50% of that area this year. So SFI is a lot more flexible than countryside stewardship previously was, where you pretty much had to do the same area year on year. And then, potentially there's, you can talk to the RPA and see if there's some more flexibility with that. But within the rules, that would be what you're allowed to do. So I think it's no knee-jerk reactions. There's flexibility to allow for between different years. But it's making sure that the decision you're making is for your business for a normal year and not just a knee-jerk to the weather conditions for that particular month or year.
Moving on now to something else we saw last year. We saw a lot of slug pressure. What sort of impact did we see the weather have on this, and how should farmers manage them if we see the same sort of impacts again this year?
Yeah, I think not that I know much about slug life cycles, but there does seem to just be so many slugs about. I guess it's just the constant wet weather. Again, we didn't have any big frosts last year, and I think that meant beneficials as well. Didn't kill the aphids, it didn't kill the beneficials. So there's lots of life about, but also slugs. There's definitely seems to be plenty of them. But I think at this point we know there's a lot of slugs. So I think that myself and all of my growers are pretty wary of that. I've been out today pretty much just walking wheat crops for slugs and assessing whether or not I need to put any pellets on. Making sure you always have slug pellets on farm because they can have the tendency to run short in supply when a lot of people are drilling. So just make sure you've got some on farm. Then it's not hard to look for. Slug damage is pretty obvious. Obvious if you can see a shiny line over your crops. So I think it's just not just the agronomist taking responsibility, but the farmer. They're looking around their farms all the time. They can equally look out for slugs as much as the agronomist can. So I was talking to a colleague today. You can chase disease. You can go and get a mist weed in the next spray timing, but once your slugs eating your bit of rape or your bit of wheat or maize plant or whatever, there's no coming back from that. It's gone. So I think that although when I'm out walking for slugs, it seems like a bit of a interesting day job. It's really important because once that seed's hollowed out, there's going to be, there's nothing going to come from it. So it's a minor but actually really important part of the year to just keep an eye on.
I mean, just to touch on that, this could be an opportunity where you look at reviewing some SFI actions, which could take advantage of creating a habitat for predators for slugs as well. But really, this is seasonal pressure, which Louise has covered beautifully.
Just another question from the audience here, from Mark Means. Ergot was a major issue this year. Do you have any techniques or any for early maturing ones, and which varieties are more susceptible? Sorry.
Yeah, ergot, it's been an absolute nightmare. I've got lots of clients that have never really had that many ergot issues, but this year just seems to be one of them. I think a lot of it stemmed from winter wheat crops not going in and not having preems, and the increased amount of grass weed pressure. A lot of it is just where you've got blackgrass pressure, brome pressure. Black grass carries ergot, and then that kind of comes in the sampling into the wheat. But I think I'm not sure there's too much when it comes to varieties and different susceptibilities, but just things like making sure that you glyphosate between your grass margins and your wheat to stop those grass weeds going into the field. It's the things like that you can do, but I think ergot is definitely something that we probably need to research more as an industry to see if there's any more things that we can do, and that's definitely already with our newly established business series Rural on the research side is definitely something that us agronomists are pushing them to. That's definitely on the list already for things to research into for our benefit, to try and reduce the amount of ergot in our crops. And then also, the grain trays are going to have to become, the mills are going to have to become a bit more open to dealing with ergot, because some of the charges to clean it out are ridiculous, and it's impossible to get a colour sorter to clean it out for as a big waiting list. So I think that the whole industry kind of needs to look at it again, because they can clean it out. But yeah, it's definitely something we're researching. So I will get back to Mark if we find any answers.
Perfect. And so just looking at the year ahead, what potential knock-on effects of this year's challenges on the crops being planted now are we likely to see, and sort of how can we sort of avoid mitigate that impact?
You broke up a bit then, Ed. Can you say it again, please?
Apologies. So I just basically said, what are the potential knock-on effects for this year's challenges on crops being planted now, and how can we look to mitigate a lot of them challenges?
I mean, really, from our end, I think a lot of people have taken on board the sort of lessons learned from the past season, spending a bit more time being patient, waiting to put crops in. So, I mean, really, there's not an awful lot we can say from our end, I don't think. Louise, you're probably seeing a lot more of it from the farm management side than I am sitting on the maize side, because my crops are only just really finished coming off.
Yeah, I think already we said definitely clients have had a bit of a slap on the wrist after last year and learnt their lesson if they did get crops in and didn't manage to spray. And the whole rule that we tried to stick to of, we're not getting the drill out and going in the field unless we know we can get behind it with the sprayer. Rolls are a bit out of the question this year. I haven't really had any clients that have managed to actually roll any crops. It's just simply been too wet and tacky on top around here. So I think that's a thing that's already been learned, and I'm already seeing that pulling through to the 2025 season. The knock-on effects from last year, grass weed burdens really, really high from some of last year's crops. Where my grass was really bad, I've put that into spring crops now, or some of that's gone into the AB6 option. But the other thing I think we've learned is, the knock-on effect I've got some really sad headlands. I've got some bits of fields which just haven't had a decent crop on them for, getting on for 18 months now, because they didn't establish last year, and pretty much since the harvest before last, there's just not really been anything that's growing in it. And I have got a few clients that are more regeneratively minded, and I encourage them to go in the summer. So when those bits, they got to like April, May time, and we bought those sad headlands that were too wet to establish a proper wheat crop in the autumn, and maybe just had a sparse few plants, we sprayed that off, and we've put in cover crops or summer cover crops just to ensure that we've got something growing on those areas of the field. And actually, they've now been sprayed off with the rest of the field, and they've been drilled into on these particular clients' farms that have done that. And it's so much better. It's more friable. Soil needs something growing in it. It needs roots in it. That's what it's all about, photosynthesis and getting that sun and pushing, that pushes out exudates into the soil, which feed all the biology. And if you don't have anything growing in the soil for 18 months, your soil does go sad. And I've seen that on other farms where they just went, oh, that's failed, that headland, we'll just forget about that until next autumn and we'll try and drill it again. But it's really sad and anaerobic. And I think that's definitely something I'm going to definitely push forward on in my career, that if you've got those sad areas and they don't establish, still try and get some growing in them. It doesn't have to be funded under SFI necessarily. If it fails, just try and get something growing in there, because or you just get the knock-on effect of a sad wet headland just comes into the following year in the following crop. So that's something that I'm definitely going to take forward into this autumn if I'm in a similar situation come the spring with poor headlands or as a field that hasn't established well.
Something to add to that, obviously, from the maize side of it. I mean, we've seen, because there wasn't really much of a frost last autumn, we've seen a bit of a burgeoning population and an expansion of European corn borer across an increase across the east, which was already there. There was already a population there, but it has now expanded quite a bit and is headed into the southwest, and also a little more north as well. So the key bits that I've been advising with growers is that we need to consider our stubble management in order to look at destroying these populations or managing them a bit before they start to grow and become uncontrollable, because anybody who's dealing with maize will understand that there are no current actives available in maize to manage European corn borer. We're talking about either having a very hard winter where frost will kill them, or you have to manage stubbles either by flailing them or by ploughing them straight after or destroying them straight after harvest. But unfortunately, because harvest has been quite late this year, there'll be plenty of stubble which is just left standing over winter. And unless we have a hard frost, there could be more of a burgeoning population next year, which means that this advice moving forward into next year is going to be incredibly important.
I think we've got time for just one last audience question from Fraser Bush. What are the panel's view on the SFI option PRF1, the variable rate nutrients when using FYM and artificial fertilizer?
Yeah, I saw that. So reading through the rules, if you would like to take advantage of that option, so I mentioned that earlier, £27 a hectare, you need to be doing variable rate across farmyard manure, all your manure applications and your artificial fertilizer. So whether you've got the capabilities to be able to do that, you can get variable rate spreaders now. We've actually just got one at home, which will make doing the option a bit easier. But whether you can still use your normal spreader and put different amounts on the bits that need more or need less, it's unclear what, if you had a inspection, what would be accepted. But definitely something to talk to with your advisor or directly ring up the RPA and ask. But it's a really good option, and it's a good payment, so it's definitely something to try and use if you can.
I think one last thing, just how I like to end a lot of these webinars, is if someone would take away one thing today, what would it be, Tom? And I'll come to you, for Louise, for the same answer. Same question next.
If you take one thing away from today, I'll make it simple. Use your damn advisor. That's what they're there for. and not enough farmers will spend enough time with their advisors or listen initially to what they say. So you're paying someone to come out on farm to help you with your crop management, your business management. Listen to their advice, because it pays dividends. And it was one gripe that I had when I was a farm consultant, is that you put the best plans in preparation for farms and they go in a completely different direction, then wonder why things don't go right.
Louise?
I think it would be to get really excited and a bit obsessed with knowing everything there is to know about your soils on your farm. Really understanding them. That's what you're growing your crop in, and they need to be resilient, because this weather that we're seeing, it's not going to stop. We're going to see a lot more extreme weather events, and having a resilient soil that's going to be able to take all that water or hold that water if we have a drought is going to be what makes a profitable crop and what keeps those gross margins where they need to be. So really understanding your soil. I challenge everyone to just get some people out, get your agronomists out. There's soil consultants that really understand even more in depth. There's really good different soil testing you can do. You can really go above and beyond what you're currently doing. We've done it at home, and I can confidently say that I really understand our soils on my family farm now. So I think that's what I challenge people to go away with and do.
Two great points to finish on. Thank you both for joining me today. I think the audience will agree that this has been an incredibly valuable and insightful webinar. Thank you as well to everyone joining us at home. It is clear, I think, despite the challenges farming has had last year, that we are gearing up for a positive 2025, which is good to see. If you are keen to learn more about these topics, you can join us at CropTec 2024 on the 27th and 28th of November at NAEC Stoneleigh, Warwickshire. You can sign up for free and register for free for CropTec at croptecshow.com. It is a really fantastic opportunity to deepen your understanding of agriculture and really connect with peers, gain new tools, and really strengthen your business to gear yourself up for a busy 2025. So as a reminder, croptecshow.com to get your free ticket. And thank you again, Tom and Louise, for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.